One of the issues with musicians, and I've noticed with students of mine, learning modes and scales and trying to apply them, is that there's a bit of a struggle in moving from just knowing what the modes and scales are to being able to apply them to a musical situation. One of the issues is we end up with this situation of option paralysis, meaning there just seem to be too many variables, too many options to choose from. How do we even structure a melody line in this? And a lot of guitar players or pianists, this goes for any instrumentalist, at first when they're trying to get used to playing over scales and modes, their solos tend to meander a lot and they don't have a good melodic structure to them because they're not thinking of the pole pieces of the melody line, meaning the chord tones or the guide tones, and they're also just like thinking about playing through the whole scale, and they feel that they have to play every note that's in the Dorian mode if they're playing Dorian. Well, in reality, what happens is we're often curating subsets or selections of notes to use from those modes or scales to create melody lines too. And scalar runs will be useful in bridging the gaps between these melody notes, but they're rarely, or I shouldn't say rarely, but for melodic playing, we don't always just play the whole scale. One of the ways to get better at this is to create some self-imposed limitations. There's all kind of ideas for self-imposed limitation within composition, as composers do this all the time, to just kind of zero in and give themselves some limitations so they don't have a million options, and it forces them to be creative within certain boundaries, which is really useful for composition, but also when learning how to solo. One of the topics I'm going to talk about, I'm going to break this into two videos because I feel like even over this one chord progression, these two different strategies that I'm using to self-impose some limitations are enough to last a while, so they should just be a main focal point. We shouldn't just be throwing a bunch of different exercises into our practice regimen just because they're there. We need to spend some time with each one of these. And so this first one I'm presenting, you should be spending several days on because you can apply it to different chord progressions, different keys, so there's a lot of meat on the bones even when it comes with this just one exercise. So I encourage you to spend a lot of time and multiple days, even weeks, with this first one to get it in your brain and just absorb all the nutrients that it has to give. So I'm using a chord progression in this example happens to be in the key of D flat. Now I know it's a hard key for everybody. It's one of the reasons I picked it. Guitar players in particular don't play in D flat a lot unless they're working with a lot of horn players, and we often end up being weaker in that key, but I feel like it's important. Now, if you go to my website, I will also have this exercise available in the key of C. So I always like to give exercises in the key of C in my lessons when I'm doing Zoom lessons. I relate everything to the key of C. I feel like if we can understand how it operates in C, we could do it in every key signature. But for this video, I'm going to challenge you a little bit just to get the point across, and if you want to get the PDF so you can just start out in the key of C, go to my website, anatomyofguitartone.com, and just send me an email on there, and I will send you the PDF that has it in the key of C. Now, I'm basically working around a 2-5-1 chord progression here with some chord substitutions, this is what I heard. That's just what I was playing with this morning, and that was the chord changes I operated under. You can use a 6-2-5-1, you can use a 4-5-1, or 1-4-1-5. Any chord progression is worked with because the technique is flexible in the sense that it's movable, right? So the first strategy that I'm going to use is only using the notes, the 1, 2, 3, and 5 from whatever mode we're playing. So if it's a Dorian mode, then we're going to play 1, 2, flat 3, perfect fifth. Right? If it happens to be Phrygian, then we're going to do 1, flat 2, flat 3, perfect fifth. So you have to know what mode or what scale that you're in to be able to apply this. But those are the only notes that we're going to use. We're not going to use the 4th, we're not going to use any of the 7th or any of the 6th or anything like that. It's just really limiting ourselves to these notes. And you'll find that John Coltrane did this a lot. He played a lot with arpeggios, but he also did a lot of work with the 1, 2, 3, and 5 motives, like just creating lines based around those those intervals of the mode, which is just really handy to know. So what I tried to do in this example, I'm going to switch to Dorico now, is I tried to construct this in a way that I'm also voice leading this. So you'll see that the last note of one chord is pretty close to the first note of the next chord that I'm playing. So I'm not making a lot of large leaps between these different chord cycles. So I'm just looking at example 1 now. That's all we're going to talk about in this particular video. So example 1, and we see that now that's just called voice leading. We're trying to make sure that there's a smooth of a line happening there. So I only use the 1 through 2, 3, and 5 in this. So if I look at the first example, I'm going to use a B flat, my guitar up, so B flat, C, D, F, right? So it's almost scalar going up to the third. And then I get up to from the third to the fifth, there's a third jump there. Now I'm gonna go to this E flat minor 7 chord, and that first chord was B flat 7, by the way. And here I'm gonna drop down to a B flat here. So we are dropping a pretty big leap there. Now D7 sharp 11, and then D flat major 7. So I started on the root of B flat 7, ended on the 5th. Starting on the 3rd of E flat minor 7, and ending on the 5th. I start from the 5th of D7 sharp 11, and then I'm going to start from the root of D flat major 7. Right? You'll see this pattern I have right now is very just 8th note based on the first half of the measure is where a lot of the action is happening. And limit yourself to the rhythms and stuff at first too. You don't want too many moving components at one time. You want to keep it pretty simple here. I see my little battery monitor came up. I'm going to have to plug this in a second. But you'll see that it's just a very simple rhythmic pattern. I'm keeping the same motive for all these exercises. I'm also not trying to introduce too many other elements at the same time. So if I'm trying to work a lot on the harmony, then I'm trying to keep the rhythm very simple so I can really focus on the harmony of this. I'm going to play along with a cassette tape. I really like to work with analog gear a lot, and I find that the tape, which is an old analog cassette recorder, allows me time to think a little bit as it's rewinding, and I don't have to plug a looper in, which loopers are great. And Zoom also makes a couple digital recorders with a speaker in it that you can use. I'm a big fan of this. Often I work in paper, you'll notice that I have. I wrote this out, and you'll actually show the PDF on the screen of this. When I'm composing, I will sit down. I'll play a chord, and actually I should dig into how I developed this at the same time. So I just kind of worked out my chord progression, and thought about what I wanted to play. And then I thought about using one of these systems to create a melody line on top of it, and I just sang the first note. I found that note first. I found those notes first, and then it just led me through the maze of how to work around using the system. Very simple 8th notes, and I just was using the system of 1, 2, 3, 5. Now I use the tape recorder to record, and pen and paper I find important. I use a nice gel pen. I use pen because you have to commit to it, and that means you have to think about what you're going to write more before you put it down on paper. There's something about pencil, or even when recording, when you know you have the option to do something over again, you will often make more mistakes because the pressure isn't there. So I use ink, and I put the pressure on to do it, and then after I had this done, I put it into Dorico so that everybody can see the tablature, and also I'd be able to upload a PDF of this and move it around to different key signatures more easily. But I can't stress enough how important working down on paper is. Writing on paper develops a stronger memory, and it's just a scientific fact. So when you're trying to learn music theory, theory music, writing it down on paper is going to be more beneficial to you than using technology, because it's just it being more embedded in your brain, which is what we really want. If you don't understand modes or some of these chords that you're seeing here, you're going to have to dig a little bit more into music theory. I do teach music theory lessons, so you could reach out to me, and I wrote a book on music theory called Practice Makes Progress, which is a simple way to describe music theory and make it more accessible. I tried to find the simplest analogies to make it easy to digest. Okay, so assuming that you know what these modes are, what these chords are, we can move forward. So I'm going to play along. This first way of playing it is more like, I guess, more of a pop way of playing, and I voice the chords more like, you know, like you would in pop, or almost like 70s, you know, yacht rock or something, right? And then the second version, I'm going to use more shell voicings, like in jazz, and this one I did use the sharp 11 there. Okay, so I'm going to play the melody line for the first one. You can hear it has more of a melodic structure to it, and I'm really only using a couple of notes of each of the modes, so it's just careful selection. And if you practice this enough, then you're just going to get better at being able to pick some of these choice notes out. I'm just going to show you the fingerings I was using here. I was using my ring finger, my third finger on the D string to grab that B flat, my first finger, my second finger, then my first finger to grab that F. Right, and then I just use my middle finger. Now you could either rock your finger here, or you could use your middle finger to grab that B flat on the way down. Now I rocked my finger for that one, but you could also use your third finger, and then, so you see I'm in position here, right? This also helps us think more about voice leading, and it's only a 4-bar phrase that I'm working out here, but it really helps us think a lot more about staying in a position and defining very clear lines. Now, if you want to take it a step further, why not make it an 8-bar phrase, and that way you must have like more of a complete sentence that you have, because right now I feel like I just stated the question, so it would be nice to have a secondary phrase where I state the answer, and we have like a full like paragraph there. If you want to expand this lesson, that would be my advice for this next week, this next 2 weeks, as you're working on just this one strategy to get used to playing over the chord changes. I'm going to play this now with a swing feel, but I'm going to play the same notes, and then I'm going to discuss the chords that I was using. So here we go. I'm going to hit the play button here. I did break the rule of the strategy once. Over the D7 sharp 11 chord, I did want to hit one of those tensions, or I should say the tension, the sharp 11, just to highlight it, because that was definitely a tension that sticks out in that chord that was, I don't know, really gave it character, and I wanted to highlight that. So I broke the 1, 2, 3, 5 pattern just on that D7 sharp 11 chord. I did the 5, sharp 11, 5, root. So just for that one note, but it was nearby. You'll see it was nearby, and so you'll find with music, it's like it's never 100% by the rules, so there's always rule breaking going on. So I try to limit it for when I'm practicing things, because I want to be really focused and have a very clear focused idea how I can just practice something to get better at it, have a system. So I did break it there, right? And let's talk about the chord progressions real quickly. So I played a B flat 7, which is a secondary dominant to the E flat minor 7. Now I played this D7 sharp 11, which is a tritone substitution for the A flat 7, which is the 5 chord of D flat major 7. So secondary dominant E flat minor 7, it's our 2 chord E flat minor 7. Then I did the flat 5 substitution for the 5 chord of D flat, which is A flat 7, and then I did the D flat major 7. Okay, reach out, let me know if you have any questions about this, and I'll check out in part 2 where I'm going to use a different strategy with the same kind of concept of how to snake through a chord cycle.